What's going on, everyone? The Utah Jazz are absolutely imploding at the moment. Quinn Synder has officially stepped down as head coach, so now there is a vacancy at head coach, and Donovan Mitchell is rumored to kind of have his decision up in the air if he wants to stick around or not. And this poses so many issues for the Utah Jazz because beyond Quinn Synder leaving and losing that stability, you already had that rift between Gobert and Donovan Mitchell, and it's very likely going to be amplified now more than ever. Utah very likely had a decision this offseason either way on who to trade, right? Will they trade Donovan Mitchell? Will they trade Rudy Gobert? Either way, now it's kind of almost like you have no choice, right? Because I don't think you can run it back. I mean, yes, you can make the argument maybe a new coach can benefit even further from them, but you already have Donovan kind of up in the air as far as like before he wanted to possibly leave. Now with Quinn, I just think it adds more signs and signals that he's very likely going to leave. So when it comes to this duo, which doesn't also really seem to be working very well, and granted, it very likely is the pieces around these two, still, teams have time and time again sort of exposed Rudy on the interior, having to draw him out, going smaller, and he doesn't have the wing defenders to really utilize in the space to be able to stay in the paint where he's most effective. And then Donovan Mitchell, he's not as much of a playmaker. He was known as a big time defensive guy coming into the league and kind of became a scorer, and thus his defense has really regressed. I mean, there's moments where he still tries, where he is still a defender, but we saw in the playoffs on several occasions him just getting blown by, him on moments not even seeming to try defensively. And that's a big issue. And Donovan Mitchell raises a big question of, is he a number one guy? Is he the guy that can get the job done and lead you to a championship? And many people don't. I mean, I'm sure Utah Jazz fans, many of them believe he is, but his type of player, the Devin Booker, the Donovan Mitchells, they're very likely that, number two option in many ways. I mean, look at the Phoenix Suns. They weren't anything until Chris Paul came. And yes, Donovan doesn't have that Chris Paul-esque player. He has Mike Conley, but Mike Conley is not Chris Paul. And the reason the Suns really benefited from Chris Paul is because he is the one option, right? He is the guy with the ball in his hands, where you have Booker as the number one scorer, but Chris Paul can kind of facilitate it and get him to his spots instead of him having to exert himself to create plays and create for others. And Donovan needs that guy. He needs that guy that is effective with the ball, but is also willing to give it up, a guy that can go and be a consistent scorer. And the problem with Rudy is he needs somebody to set him up. He's not a guy that is offensively sound that you can just dump the ball down to and he can go get you a bucket. You usually have to set him up, or you have to put him in a position where he can be effective. The dunker spot, things like that. So it's very likely that Utah is at a point now with no Quinn Synder, with Donovan's fate kind of just looming in the air. You got to make a decision. You got to move on. And in reality, Donovan Mitchell is the player that you would imagine building your team around. Whether he is the number one option or he's the number two, however you decide to structure your team, he makes the most sense to build around. He is that type of core player that many teams would love to build their team around, right? The issue is he's the only one with real honest trade value. And Rudy Gobert, don't get me wrong, he has a lot of value, but not to the level that a Donovan Mitchell will have. Not just that, but Rudy, his contract is very questionable for the amount he makes and what he offers. Yes, he brings an elite post presence, but that's basically it, right? He's a liability on offense. He can't shoot free throws. We saw teams, hack a Gobert during the playoffs and stuff like that. That becomes an issue. That becomes a liability. And not many teams are probably going to want to, one, take on his contract, and two, be willing to have him be a significant part. That doesn't mean that there's not teams out there that would make that trade. There's rumors of Dallas wanting him to be an interior presence. The Toronto Raptors are another team that many people think would take Gobert on. But Donovan is the guy that could really bring you a solid return if you wanted to rebuild or sort of retool things along those lines. He could probably get you another young star and maybe a piece or two because he's proven in this league already, right? He could probably get you, 2 or 3 pieces maybe on the right team. Like a team like New York would probably give you quite a return for Donovan Mitchell. Another team, the Toronto Raptors, right? The Toronto Raptors, they need scoring. And they have a treasure trove of wings. So could you get like a OG Anunoby and, a Trent, something along those lines to where you have these 2 pieces that really fit with Gobert? It actually helps the situation that Gobert had in the past playoffs, things like that. Donovan Mitchell, although I think if it comes down to it, I think Utah will keep Mitchell over Gobert. But I just think he has the most trade value. That doesn't necessarily mean that they should trade him. It's just an option that, I want to throw out there. And of course, hear your thoughts and opinions. So let me know down in the comment section. But when it comes to Rudy, right? Again, all the things that I highlighted. He is a great defensive interior guy. He is a guy that is the anchor to your defense. He is the guy that is going to control the paint as you need. He has the size. He has the athleticism in many ways. And he is a guy that can't really be effective outside of the interior area. Like I've thrown out a possibility of him going to the Phoenix Suns because I just think Chris Paul would really benefit from having him, and he would heavily benefit from having an orchestrator like Chris Paul. I mean, Chris Paul could put him in the best position to be successful. Toronto is another place. They like those big guys. They have the wings to put around Gobert to actually allow him to be utilized and effective in the paint. That's a team he likely needs to go to. Even Dallas, right? Dallas has a bunch of wings. They have a bunch of guys that we saw can guard the perimeter. So Rudy doesn't have to go outside and try to defend a smaller defender or things like that. They would have to match the size of the Dallas Mavericks. And again, you have a guy in Luka that can facilitate and put Gobert in his best positions, in a position to be successful, to score points. And we also saw with the Jazz, Rudy was very opinionated about wanting to get those touches. And the problem is that one, Donovan doesn't really seem interested in getting him his, 12 touches a game. Donovan wants to score and he wants to win the game and stuff like that. And he doesn't want to force feed Gobert. And he knows I can't just dump the ball down to him. But somebody like Luka that can get into the paint, that can draw everyone out, you're surrounding him with shooters, things like that. He can easily get, 3 or 4 touches just on lobs from drives and, lobs to the basket, and Rudy's just dunking and finishing. Not just that, but putbacks, things like that. I just think he needs to go to a team that is very effective. The problem is that most teams that would trade for him and most teams that would actually be able to make him effective likely aren't going to give up a ton. And not just that, but Utah's likely going to have to take on some significant contracts. Nobody's trading a star for Rudy Gobert. You're not going to go get a Jaylen Brown for a Rudy. Like, it's just not going to happen. And so very likely that means if you trade Rudy with his contract, you have to match the salaries. So you're taking on probably several bad contracts that I don't think Utah would want in a rebuild or even just a retooling, right? If you have Donovan and you trade Rudy and you take back 3 or 4 bad contracts just to make it work, you get some pieces, but are those pieces going to be good enough and effective enough for Donovan to be successful and feel like, okay, this is where I want to be. I want to be here. Where I just, again, think that you would get a much better return for Donovan. And yes, he's a guy that Utah absolutely loves. He's a guy that is, a 23 point a game scorer, but that doesn't mean that he's also easier to replace, right? You can't just, you've all heard the saying, right? 7-footers don't grow on trees, things like that. That is true. That is significant. That is important. And you can't teach that defensive presence, that defensive IQ. He also has great hands, Rudy does, at getting the ball and just finishing around the rim, stuff like that. So you get a couple pieces that could really sort of put a nice light on Rudy, and he's your defensive anchor, and you're kind of building outwards. I just think that may work better for Utah unless they just want a full-on rebuild. And not just that, if Donovan asks out and he wants to leave, then maybe you trade both, right? I mean, seriously, it's a real option, right? Say you could get an OG and a couple pieces for a Donovan, right? Or you have the Knicks and maybe they give an RJ Barrett or something like that and a couple pieces for a Donovan Mitchell, right? Because he is, again, a proven guy that can go and put up 50 points in a playoff game and get you 23, 25 a game. He is a guy that can be your number one or number two option. Although I personally think he's more of a number two, still, he's a guy that can put up points, can lead a team to at least the playoffs from what we've seen. And so if you can get a solid return for him and then maybe trade Gobert to a team that can get you, another couple solid pieces, then maybe you can expedite that rebuild a little bit or at least be put in a position and have this salary to where, okay, well, maybe we can, with, 2 or 3 of the pieces that we got here, maybe we can add some key free agents and make a solid team. I just think overall, Utah is in a very bad position, no matter how you shape it. But as always, I pass the question on to you. So let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. What do you think about the Utah Jazz? What do you think they should do? Do you think that you keep Donovan and you build around him? Do you think that you keep Rudy, you build around him? Do you think you trade them both and just kind of blow things up and, start from scratch? Because, again, what are you going to get for Rudy that's going to appease Donovan enough to really buy in and want to stay? I just think that that's the big problem too, is like, I don't see you going and getting even like, say, a Zach LaVine, right? Say you do a sign and trade, Gobert. I don't think Chicago would do something like that. And it's just like, who else? Yeah. Who else are you going to get? Bradley Beal? At one, I don't think Bradley Beal wants to leave, apparently, from what we've seen. And not just that, would Washington want a Gobert? I just think the options for Rudy are very slim and very limited. And the only teams that would really maybe jump at the opportunity to take him very likely are going to want to unload a couple bad contracts. Yeah, you might get a draft pick or two out of it, maybe a nice, young, solid player, but I don't think you're going to get anything that's Donovan's going to be like, this is it. This is my guy. This is our team. Let's run it. Let's do it. Let's get a new coach. Let's put things together. Like let's make this happen. I just don't see that happening. I think seeing Quinn Synder step down was sort of the final nail in the coffin for the Utah Jazz. And I think Donovan very likely is going to want out. But anyway, let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comment section below. That being said, if you haven't liked this video, hit that like button. Helps me out a lot. Lets me know you enjoy these types of videos, and I truly appreciate it. If you're not subscribed to the channel, hit that subscribe button. Follow the bell for notifications. Stay up to date with all things sports. Join this wonderful community and all of our discussions. I'll see you all in the next one. Thank you.